Hey guys, welcome to Hip Use History. I heard you might want to know what an oligarchy is, especially with it being thrown all over the internet and Bernie Sanders claiming that the United States is an oligarchy. I'm not going to answer that question. You best be the one to do that in the comments below. But what it means is that power rests with small people. It comes from the Greek oligos, meaning the few, and archo, meaning to rule. The few will rule. And you can go way back to like 400 BC in Athens when they were really trying to deal with oligarchies, and they would actually pick people by doing what was called the drawing of lots, where you would be picked to be a leader, very much like jury duty now in the United States. You like open up the mail, you'd be like, I'm vice president. So they were concerned about it. We're talking 2,500 years ago, so the problem's been around for a long time. An oligarchy doesn't have to be a system that rules with totalitarianism, but historically it generally has been. The easier ones to identify would be like hereditary stuff, like the monarchs that ruled Europe in the Middle Ages, that's passed down from father to son and onward. That's an oligarchy, you know. They rule the country, they're the few, there's the many. Now in modern day, people have claimed that the Russians are an oligarchy after the fall of communism, with a very few families and rich people gobbling up the kind of natural resources and becoming super millionaires, and along with the religious Orthodox Church really controlling Russia with Putin. You might know from 1984, The Inner Party, if you read that novel by George Orwell, would be an example of an oligarchy. If you don't read books, you've probably seen The Hunger Games, so Panem, the capital, run by those people with the big hair and the poofy dresses and such, that would be an oligarchy as well. So where does the claim that the United States is an oligarchy? Well, you really have to look at two important kind of ideas. One would be kind of statistics that show that we have a humongous gap that's growing between kind of the rich and the poor, with the middle class really being shrunk. We haven't had a gap between that rich and the poor since 1928. Right now, the richest 400 American families own more than 50% of the wealth of the United States. Now you have to take that idea that the 1% and the 1/10 of the 1% own humongous chunks of wealth in the United States, that not only is that going to make it harder for the middle class to grow and for people's salaries to grow, but that when you add the fact of Citizens United into that formula, if you don't know anything about Citizens United, which is really opening the floodgates to money in campaigns through back channels that are now legal. So for instance, 158 families donated $176 million towards the 2016 campaign in 2015. Now, 119 of those families donated to Republican causes versus 37 for Democratic causes. So they overwhelmingly lean to the right. They want things like the cut in inheritance tax. They want deregulation. They want to shrink entitlements. Now, there are others who want that as well. So is it that we get those things, or there's a push for those things because the elite want them, or do they just have that in common with other Americans? So there was a study. There's always a study. We have the Testing Theories of American Politics in 2014 by Martin Gylens out of Princeton University and Ben Page out of Northwestern University, who really researched this. And they looked at people living in the 90th percentile, right? They're richer than 90% of everybody else, what their wants and their needs were. And then they looked at people that were sitting right in the middle, bam, the 50th percentile. And what they found wasn't so much that the rich got what they wanted. It was more that the rich got to stop what they didn't want. So when they statistically broke it down, let's say they wanted something like cutting Medicare or Medicaid, those types of things, deregulating an industry, that they got what they wanted, the 90th percentile, 45% of the time. But when they looked at policies that were popular with the American people, for instance, one thing they looked at was the carried interest reduction, which basically is a fancy way of saying that if you make your money by purchasing other companies, like Mitt Romney did with Bain Capital, the vast amount of the wealth that he claimed as income was taxed at a much lower rate. This was to spur investment and spur more mergers. He paid a 15% tax. So his secretary, and this was the claim by Barack Obama in 2012, that his secretary paid a higher tax than him. That's true. So if the majority of Americans want to get rid of that, if they say that's weird, that's nonsense, we shouldn't do that, Why can't we get that done? And what the study says was that if that 90th percentile was against a policy idea, it only had an 18% chance of passing. So quid pro quo, I don't know. Is there a connection? I don't know. Do middle-class Americans sometimes share the very same ideological ideas as right-wingers that are rich? Absolutely. But the bigger question is campaign finance, is the money pouring into campaigns influencing what our public policy is? And if that's true, what can we do about it? Leave it down in the comments below. We hope you at least can say the word oligarchy. Oligarchy. Say that 10 times fast. You own the word. And then you can talk about it too. All right, guys, where attention goes, energy flows. Giddy up for learning. We'll see you guys next time you press my buttons. I'm going to go back to banging on the stove.